biggest stories in Denver sports and interacting live with you, the Coffee Break fam. So sit back, relax, grab a cup of Joe, and enjoy your coffee break. Here's your host, Rachel V. Hill.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. I hope you all had a wonderful Monday night as we're going to get into, of course, Drew Lock. What the heck, Drew Lock? And the conversation that I think needs to stop. But of course, and Will Peterson also will be joining us here in a little bit. But we have to get into the conversation of the show today. Who does Peyton Manning have matching up with the Denver Broncos if they can make the playoffs? If you watched Monday night, the Peyton and Eli simulcast that they did last night, which honestly, I absolutely love Monday Night Football because I love watching them interact with all their guests. I think it is so much fun. But he has them lining up with the Indianapolis Colts to play in the wild card, which again is going to be the next broadcast that they do. And I thought that this was fascinating. So I caught him saying it once, and I was like, okay, so like he has faith that the Broncos are still going to be able to make the playoffs. Like very clearly, he kind of made that. And then towards the end of the broadcast, they're like, well, we have to make our predictions. Like we're not going to be on until the wild card games, essentially. And he had brought up the Broncos playing the Indianapolis Colts. So Peyton Manning continuing to, shock me because I feel like I'm looking at this like it's not going to be looking too good. I don't know how they're going to be able to pull it off with all the help that they need after losing to the Detroit Lions. I'm like, they just need so much help that it's going to shock me if they're able to pull it off. They have to win out, essentially, and we're going up against a very good Patriots defense. Bill Belichick has that defense looking real good. Who they're going to double coverage, I'm not sure, too. But I do think that there's going to be I don't think it's going to be as easy as we all kind of had anticipated. I think that the Broncos are definitely on the struggle bus. If the defense can get turnovers, then you never know. But you guys, Peyton Manning is saying against the Indianapolis Colts, I feel like we kind of got to buy into this idea that it's a possibility. Okay, so now what needs to happen for the Colts to actually do it? They're kind of in the exact same space that the Broncos are in. They, first of all, need to win out. And Jacksonville holds critical tiebreakers over both the Colts and the Texans. And of course, we've been talking about the Texans, I feel like, a ton because it's also like, well, now they have the tiebreaker over the Broncos for getting in, etc. But essentially, Jacksonville has this tiebreaker. Now, again, Jacksonville, obviously, they're going in with a backup QB this week. There's going to be, some of these kind of like what essentially is going to happen with Jacksonville. I feel like Trevor Lawrence obviously dealing with the concussion and all that kind of stuff. It definitely adds like a little bit of asterisks of like, oh, well, the Colts possibly could do that. And then Indy on their schedule, they've got Atlanta, which we saw how that game went against the Panthers this weekend. Just an absolute boring game. The 45-cent tickets. I feel like Mason and I slightly touched on that yesterday. You guys, 45-cent tickets to get in. You could get into an NFL game for like $5 if you really wanted to. I don't think I've ever heard that. I've heard of like $20 tickets, but $5 or even 45 cents is absolutely crazy. And then Indy wraps up the season with Las Vegas, so the Raiders, and then Houston too. So they've got a few tricky games in there. We don't know what's going to happen with CJ Stroud either. So they have to win out. But yeah, Peyton Manning having the Colts and then the Broncos playing in the wild card game is definitely very interesting. But can you really ever go against Peyton Manning? You guys, I feel like that's so hard. Like I just can't ever go against him. So I'm like, all right, Peyton, if you're on board with it, I'll get on board with it too. Let's talk though about the Monday night game real quick, you guys. Oh my gosh. First of all, I think that the Eagles just kind of thought that they were going to be able to, walk into that game, have Jalen Hurts, even though he was sick, throw a few long bombs and they were going to walk away super easy. Some of the play calling that they had, I was so confused by what they were doing. I was like, wait a second. Like, why are we even doing this? Like, why would you throw that long bomb? I don't even remember. I think it was on third down, maybe second down. And it was intercepted. And I was like, this was like such a stupid play call. Just run the ball. Continue to run the ball. You were totally fine doing that. I don't know what the Eagles were thinking, but obviously Drew Lock ends up being able to carry the team, carry the Seahawks down the field, you guys. That was such a wild game to watch. And honestly, watching Drew Lock be so emotional afterwards, it made your heart like hurt a little bit. Like I know people here in Denver, or you were either a Drew Lock fan or you weren't. I was a Drew Lock fan. I felt like he never got a real shot, but it was time for the Broncos to move on and all of that conversation. But it was just like, he was so emotional of like, this team rallied behind me and we were able to pull off a like must-win game. I don't know. It was just so sweet in the way that they did it. DK Metcalf, we know he's amazing. Holy smokes, though, is he freaking amazing, you guys. Some of the catches he made were absolutely insane last night. But yes, I was just like so on board for Drew Lock. I was so happy. But also looking at this weekend, you guys, man, all of the quarterbacks that the Broncos have had in the past couple of years really just hurt the Broncos' chances. I mean, you had Joe Flacco, who won helped the Browns win 20-17. I was like, of course, here comes Joe Flacco. What are we doing? Case Keenum, who was also on the Monday night game last night, obviously with the Manning cast, helped the Texans win with CJ Stroud being out. I was like, oh my gosh, like all of these backup quarterbacks essentially, or past quarterbacks for the Broncos, ultimately led their teams to victory. And then here we are all looking at the Lions game like, can we please just move on? I don't even want to look at this game. I don't want to talk about this game. I just want to move on and look ahead too. So that one kind of stung, but I was really happy for Drew Lock. I don't know about you guys. I see some of the comments now. Okay, I see this comment though. I wish we had lockdown. You guys, we need to have this conversation. We do not wish we had Drew Lock here in Denver, okay? It's just not the case. What Pete Carroll is able to do with the quarterbacks is a whole different conversation. Okay, clearly he made Russ look like a Hall of Fame quarterback. That's just the truth. Sean Payton can't make Russ look like that, then Pete Carroll deserves an award. And that's exactly what he did with Drew Lock too. I mean, even Geno Smith. So I think we need to give Pete Carroll a lot of credit because he can make quarterbacks. He uses their strengths and really utilizes them. He really dives into them. And that's exactly what it feels like Pete Carroll has done with all of them. And that's what we saw out of Russell Wilson and him wanting to get away from that. And looking back now, Pete Carroll just deserves a freaking award when it comes to it. So no, I don't think we want Drew Lock here in Denver. Honestly, they could have easily had lost that game too. But yes, he pulled off a miracle game. They all rallied behind him. Honestly, it kind of reminded me of, you know, when a team fires their head coach and all of a sudden all the players rally behind him and they're like, all right, everybody, let's go out there and win. Or they're rallying behind the now interim head coach. That's what it felt like. It felt like Drew Lock was the interim quarterback and they were like, you know what? We need to rally behind this guy. He's been working his tail off. Let's get out there. And that's what it felt like they did. And he was so emotional. And it was so sweet. And I just loved it so much for him. And I was really happy that they were able to get the win. But I couldn't help, you guys, and let me know if you think this too. I couldn't help but sit there last night and be like, you wonder if Russell Wilson regrets wanting to be traded. He would never say it. But honestly, he was so loved in Seattle and everybody was like, well, now he's hated. He's hated because he wanted out. He didn't want to be a part of that anymore. But man, if you're Russell Wilson, you kind of got to sit there and be like, I was so loved out there in Seattle. We were winning games. And yeah, we may not have been playing the way that he wanted to be playing the game. But at the exact same time, essentially, he was just so loved. And here in Denver, I feel like he's kind of, I don't know. I don't think people love him. They don't adore him like they did in Seattle. So I don't know. It was definitely interesting, but I couldn't help but wonder that if he was watching that game last night being like, man, I do miss Seattle a little bit, even though city of Denver is a little bit better in my personal opinion, even though they have great seafood out there in Seattle too. So yeah, it was one of those things that I couldn't help but just be like, I wonder if Russell Wilson feels that way at all because he had it so good in Seattle, even though he may not have been playing the type of style of football he wanted to. He's also not playing that here in Denver either under Sean Payton. Colin Cowherd, you guys, let's get into this conversation. He had a little bit of a clip that was going viral yesterday talking about how he believes Sean Payton will be willing to move on even if he has to take a huge salary cap hit. We will talk about this with Will Peterson when he joins us here in just a little bit because Will Peterson's not a big fan of the salary cap. He honestly thinks it's kind of a little bit of a myth, but also the Nuggets played last night. And you guys, Richie and Jake had so much fun on our Nuggets recap that we have to send it over to them down there at Ball Arena.
All right, that's a wrap. Another solid game for the Nuggets here at Ball Arena. I mean, Jake, you score 130-plus points. You shoot over 50% from the field. You out-rebound them, and you dominate in the paint. There's not much more you can do, right?
Yeah, the Nuggets are in a place right now, Richie, that feels like they were last December. They're right on the cusp of making a run, and they had that huge run last December that really propelled them to the 1 seed, and they've had 2 of their last 3 home games have been really easy wins. Yeah, they had a loss to the Thunder in between with the choke job, but it seems like it's starting to all come together for the Nuggets, and I just looked at the schedule, next 14 games. I could see them going 13-1 over that next 14 games.
Yeah, I mean, they're clearly capable of doing it. Like you said, it feels like they're right on the cusp of it. You're getting some of those same vibes. They're not turning the ball over. They're making smart decisions. Jokic is shooting the ball way less than you would think he might need to in a game against a star like Luka. and it just really does feel like they're clicking.
Yeah, and I think the thing that's impressed me, Richie, is the big question this year was who's going to be their 8-man rotation? Who are going to be the guys that fill in behind that awesome starting five? Peyton Watson has stepped up tremendously as of late. Christian Brown is finally putting together that 3-and-D stuff we saw last year with some playmaking things they've added on to his game this year. And then you still kind of got a question mark of who's going to be the big. But Reggie Jackson, man, they should call him Revelation Jackson because he's been a revelation for the Nuggets. He's been awesome. And, KCP comes back tonight, and you could see how much of a difference
it makes.
Yeah.
It makes a difference. Well, not a lot of bad things to say, but I'm sure they'll have a few things to work on, and we'll see how they get going towards Christmas.
Okay, so love those guys for doing that. It was honestly so fun. You could tell that they were having a blast at the game last night. But James Marilat makes a good point, you guys, and I'm going to bring in our very own Will Peterson here in just a second. He says, I think Russ questioned, rightfully so, the decision to kick a field goal, and Sean Payton decided to remind him who was in charge. That's what James Marilat is thinking about this, let's just say, conversation that happened on the sidelines. But good morning, Will Peterson. How are you?
Hey, Rachel, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. I was talking a lot about Drew Lock, the Monday night game. Obviously, it was such a good game to watch. I was so happy for Drew to be able to get the win. And, he was so emotional after the game. But I'm also like, everybody, pump your brakes. We don't want Drew Lock here in Denver, okay? Like, let's stop that conversation right now. I know things aren't great here in Denver. We had high hopes, but, let's pump the brakes on that conversation.
I mean, they've won 6 of their last 8 games. I think things are pretty darn good still in Denver. I know it's a what have you done for me lately because everyone panicked after the Houston loss, and then everyone panicked after the Detroit loss. So, no, I'm not going to let Drew Lock, who had, 110 yards going into the final 90 seconds last night, make me say, I wish we still had Drew Lock. That would be a little silly. That said, very happy for Drew. It was an awesome drive. It was a great post-game interview. But, no, you can't sit here and make grand declarations about where the Broncos would be with Drew Lock based on a spectacular 70 seconds on Monday Night Football.
Yeah. Do you think that Broncos country is just lost all faith? Because we had so many bad years, Will, of just oh, here we go. Our hopes are up. This is going to be the savior. And then it comes back to bite us in the butt a little bit. Do you think that people are just I don't have the faith anymore?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you see the commenters a lot more than I do. So maybe I just feel different than the folks who are chiming in. But no, I mean, they're still 7-7. As long as Buffalo loses one, I think there's something like a 90% chance 10-7 can get them in. A lot of these teams play each other down the stretch. It's not a guarantee 10-7 gets them in. Maybe that's why people are down, is because Saturday night was frustrating. And then Sunday was just wrong result after wrong result after wrong result after wrong result. But no, I mean, we're not sitting here talking about a 3-11 football team or a 4-10 football team. They're still 7-7. They still have 3 very winnable games left. I'm going to keep it a little more positive than maybe you're wanting to right now.
No, please. I feel like I'm just confused all the time, right? I'm I don't know how I should feel. One day I feel like I'm all right, the Broncos, maybe they can do it. And then other days I'm what are we doing? We're in purgatory right now if they win 8, 9, or 10 games. We talked about that even before the season began, right? Because then it comes down to, if you don't make the playoffs, what do you do with Russell Wilson? Because you have this huge contract that you either have to just say, all right, we're going to wave goodbye to that money, send Russ on his way, and, stick with Jared Stidham or a, mid-first round QB. And I don't think that's going to go exactly as everyone's hoping it'll go. Or do you stick with him another year and see what you can happen, even though Sean Payton clearly not exactly thrilled with the quarterback right now, and then also just not being able to open up the playbook as much?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's the huge question that we're going to be counting down the days until that decision is due in mid-March. It's going to be, I mean, unless they fall apart and go 7-10 and it's just abundantly clear they're going to move on, or unless they go to the AFC title game and it's abundantly clear they have to keep him, it will be the story. And I think we both agree going 7-10 probably has a 2% chance, and going to the AFC title game has a 0.1% chance. So it's somewhere in the middle of where they're going to finish, which makes, the decision, if you will. LeBron always had the decision when he went from Cleveland to Miami. This feels like the decision part 2 for Sean Payton, and even more so for Greg Penner, because it's his sort of, money that they would be burning, and then you have to go pay another quarterback next year as well as all the guarantees they owe Russ. So, Rachel, it's going to be a really, really fascinating couple of months, and you wonder, if they're going to cut him, do they just pull the Band-Aid off in February and just get it over with? Or do they take it all the way down to the deadline when that 2025 guaranteed money is due, which again is the before the league year. This year, guys like Andrew Mason can explain it better than I can. But long story short, whether or not Russ is going to be here next year and beyond, we'll know by March.
Okay, so I really wanted to have Will on the show because he had a tweet. You were responding back, I think, to Matt Smith's comment because he mentioned something about the salary.
Josh Dover's comment, yeah.
Okay, Josh Dover. I was like, there was some comment, and I saw, and you were like, you said something about it being myth or something along those lines. I can't remember exactly. But it just was like, okay, Will Peterson, what are you talking about? So maybe the salary cap isn't that big of a deal when it comes to Russell Wilson if they decide to move on. Give me the details on this because I'm so curious your thought process.
Yeah, I mean, you don't really have to put your tinfoil hat on to know that my take is just that the NFL salary cap is pretty much a myth. Like it's never been enforced. The Saints were in cap hell for 10 years under Sean Payton, and it never seemed to make that much of a difference on who they could and couldn't sign and what they could and couldn't accomplish. And they could, when, if the salary cap was so crippling, you would have thought the Saints would have won 3 games or 4 games because they couldn't afford to pay anyone. Well, they won 10 games every year. So I understand that it eventually catches up to you. But you can always write checks and kick things down the road and defer money and ultimately just make it someone else's problem 10 years from now. Maybe the Saints are in trouble now, but Sean Payton's not there anymore. So, yes, having to eat the dead cap money for Russell Wilson would hurt. I'm not saying it would be $0. It would be tens of millions of dollars. I get that. But Sean Payton is a genius at circumventing the salary cap, which, again, looks more and more like it doesn't exist because you never hear of this salary cap absolutely crippling the best teams because they can't afford to pay their players. Look at all the superstars on the loaded teams around the league. How do the 49ers afford to pay everyone? Yeah, they have a cheap quarterback, but they've got a lot of skill position players that are making a lot of money. So at some point, Rachel, I think the panic about, oh my gosh, the cap, calm down. Sean Payton knows how to get around the cap. The bigger disappointment to me would be that Russ wasn't the guy and they had to move on, not they're so in trouble for the next 3 years because they got to eat this dead money. They'll figure out a way around the dead money.
Yesterday, everybody, Will and I were sitting in a meeting, and I literally turned around and I was like, can you believe that we're having these conversations about the fact that it's like, okay, is there going to be a countdown to if the Broncos move on from Russell Wilson, a quarterback that we were all so excited for, and yet we're having this conversation of like he just hasn't lived up to the expectations. It's been a crazy few years around here.
Yeah, and if you move on from Russ, you have to move on from George Payton. That's just the way it works because, you should have moved on from George Payton when you fired Hackett. He was the one who hired Hackett. They somehow gave Hackett another year. But if he fails you on Hackett and fails you on Russ and you have to cut Russell Wilson, which, again, I don't think they should. I'm just saying if they do, the hypothetical if, then you have to move on from George Payton because he's the one who made the trade.
Wait, so you're not on bye-bye Russ. You're on let's see what we can do another year with Russ?
Rachel, we've watched more rookies than ever start in the NFL this year. It's something like 11 or 12 now. Only like half the teams have their original starting quarterback. Feels like everyone and their brother in the AFC playoff conversation is starting a backup quarterback.
Yep.
Do we really want to reset the clock on, do we want to be the team that's playing Easton Stick or Aiden O'Connell or Bailey Zappi or insert second round QB here? Quarterbacks are hard to come by. So unless you can tell me that, Kirk Cousins is on line 1, I'm not doing it unless it's a proven bet. Because I was willing to do it when they were going to get a top 5 pick. I was willing to do it when it was going to be Caleb Williams or Drake May. But now that their draft pick is going to be in the middle of the first round, I don't know why you would move on from Russell Wilson when you have your first competitive team in many, many years here in Denver.
You're not a Bo Nix fan?
Bo Nix? But it was 29, 30?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like Bo Nix was in college for 17 years. I'm good on Bo Nix.
Hey, maturity, right? You got to look at the positive. No, I'm totally kidding. I'm not on board for it either. I'm also not sure what I want the future for Russell Wilson to look like because I want to see what this like crazy playbook's going to open up to be. And I think a lot of people have made it, very clear that Sean Payton, no matter what, is going to let his, I don't know if pride's the right word, but like not let that affect it, right? He's like, no, we're going to make the playoffs this year. Like, I'm not going to just see what Russell Wilson can do. I want to make the playoffs this year because that looks good for my name kind of thing. I find it very interesting, that relationship between Sean Payton and Russell Wilson. And I've said it before. I really wish that Russell Wilson would have just come back at Sean when he was yelling at him on the sidelines and been like, Coach, like, what the heck do you want me to do? Like, I don't know. In those situations of just like, Russ, give me some emotion. Like, let me know that you actually really, really care instead of just staying so neutral along the lines. I don't know. I was a little frustrated that we didn't see more emotion out of Russell Wilson too.
Yeah, a little robot Russ. We've seen that time and time again. It was really bad last year when they were going, 4-11, his 15 starts, 5-12 overall. It's been a little better this year. But you had the tweet in real time that I thought was just the best point was, hey, rather than chewing out your QB, Sean, why don't you throw your challenge flag? Because Jaleel scored on second down and Javonte scored on third down. And then the Quinn Miners bogus offsides on fourth down. You can't challenge, but it never happens if you challenge Jaleel or Javonte on second and third down. So,
True.
Yeah, that whole situation is still weird. I wrote about it this morning at denversports.com. And Rachel, my biggest thing is Sean Payton owes Russell Wilson an apology, and preferably a public apology. When he gets to that microphone tomorrow, I think it would be good if Sean says, listen, everyone, I addressed it with Russ. I told him I was sorry. We're moving on. Because as much as some people might be down, I'm not down. I still think they can go 10-7. But to get the season back on track, you need to get rid of that elephant in the room. Everyone will move on if Sean just takes 15 seconds tomorrow and says he apologized to Russ.
You know what's really weird, and this is me like really nitpicking, deep diving. Did you notice in the presser that he said Russell? Like, I feel like if you're like on good terms with somebody, like we all call him Russ. Like, we probably shouldn't be calling him Russ, but everybody calls him Russ, and he called him Russell.
Yeah, as a Will William guy, 99% of people call me Will, but when I'm in trouble, people call me William. So
True.
I kind of see your point there of like a little bit of the principal's office. I'm not calling him Russ. I'm calling him Russell.
Yep, I know. That was my like nitpicking. I was like, oh, interesting. The other conversation that's come up a ton after the game on Saturday, Will, is about Javonte Williams. And if he should continue to be the number one back, people have been frustrated, I think, with some of his play because, before his injury, he was so electric and he was carrying guys 25 yards down the field. Now, you can't have that every single season, and I totally get that. But I think people are seeing what Samaje Perine is bringing, and it's a little bit more of this like almost bigger back who is able to move, and they're putting him like in the game during really important plays. Like we're seeing him come in on third down all the time. It feels like he seems to be a little bit more dynamic compared to Javonte. So I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, I feel like everyone's catching up with me. I had the play Samaje take 3 weeks ago when he got, I believe it was one carry down in Houston, and I was just appalled. I think he had one carry for 1 yard against the Texans. It was like, what are we doing? This guy has played in 2 AFC title games the last 2 years. He scored touchdowns in both of them in Arrowhead Stadium. I understand he was behind Joe Mixon in Cincinnati, but it felt like every time Samaje got a chance with the Bengals, he popped. And Javonte Williams, like you said, great story, phenomenal comeback. But Rachel, it just seems like he's got a lot of Courtland Sutton in him that it's going to take a year or two, or fingers crossed not, but 3 for him to get back to 100% like it did with Courtland. Courtland was not the same guy until this season. I mean, think about it. He tore that thing in 2020. So, yeah, they need to make Samaje the starter. They need to mix Jaleel in a little more, even though I'm not the biggest Jaleel fan in the world. He can maybe hit an occasional home run. And Javonte should get, 5, 6, 7 carries, sort of what Samaje is getting right now. I think you need to do something drastic there. I think you need to flip the roles the last 3 games of the season. Samaje getting the workload of 70% of the carries, 75% of the carries, something like that.
I was going to say, were you a fan of running back by committee like they did last year?
I think if you don't have the superstar, then it's not the worst strategy in the world. If you don't have Christian McCaffrey, sure, running back by committee. But if you have 3 just kind of guys, then I still think you should pick one to be the lead guy and then mix in the other ones as kind of fire and ice. The problem is they pick Javonte to be the lead guy, and Samaje is the better running back. So at this point, you've got to flip it at least to 50-50, Rachel, if not something more extreme.
All right. How are you feeling about the game on Sunday night?
I want Sean to apologize to Russ first, and then I can start looking at Sunday night. Now, I mean, listen, it's so early in the week that I haven't really digested it all that much yet because I'm still kind of ticked off about last week. But the reality is the Patriots are not very good. That being said, they beat the Steelers, and then they, gave the Chiefs a little bit of a game last weekend. Not a ton, but a little bit of a game. So you can't just roll out of bed and say, hey, let's start, pouring the eggnog. This is an easy win. You need to suck them out early and make them want to get on a plane and get home because it's going to be a late night for the Patriots. A lot of those guys have young kids. They're not going to be getting back to the Boston area, New England area until 3, 4 in the morning. So guess what? If you go up 14-0 after the first quarter, all they're going to be thinking about is get me on that plane and get me the heck home to my family. So I think the key is going to be getting up on them early and not making them think, oh, we can win this game. Because at that point, if you give them any sort of belief, they're going to say, screw it, we're here anyways. Might as well get a dub before we go home. I think it's about sort of, sucking the energy out of them early and making them be like, I'd rather be anywhere else on earth than Denver on Christmas Eve in the snow at 8:30.
I don't blame him right there either. Do you think Bill Belichick's going to go to the Chargers? That's like all the big rumors, right? Of like, oh, he's out of New England, but he's being linked to the Chargers.
Yeah. I don't know how much longer Bill wants to do this is the thing.
That's my point too. I'm like, he's like, how old is he at this point?
Yeah, he's certainly in his 70s. I mean, listen, if Bill just wanted to go right off into the sunset, I don't think anyone would blame him. Yeah. That's a nice, who knows how long the guy's going to live. But that's a nice 20, 25 years of being on a beach and hanging out on a boat. So
for sure.
He didn't have anything left to prove. And the only thing he would want to prove is, it was me, not Brady, because Brady wouldn't win the Super Bowl and he'd want to go win a Super Bowl somewhere else. But Rachel, it's such a daunting, impossible task to win a Super Bowl. Yeah. He could coach the Chargers for the next 10 years and not win a Super Bowl. So my gut tells me he's more likely to retire than go coach somewhere else.
Okay. Yeah. He's 71. I'm like, at that point, you've made all the money you probably need to make. Go out there, find a beach, Bill Belichick, hang out, go to a Taylor Swift concert, do something fun. Like, I don't know. He needs to do something.
And your 6 Super Bowl rings can go with you. Like no one's going to take those away from you. So
no, for sure. Even with the season he's had, everybody's still like, he's like one of the greatest head coaches ever. So I'm like, Bill, go live your life, dude. Get away from the football field.
Bill's proving what happens to every head coach when they don't have a quarterback. Like if you don't have a quarterback, it is hard to be successful in this league. And you could be the greatest coach of all time, which Bill Belichick may very well be. And this is what's happening to him and the Patriots this year.
For sure. All right, Will, anything you're working on for DenverSports.com?
No, I would just encourage people to go check out my column this morning just because it's a minor thing. I think the headline grabs people's attention. They're like, oh, my God, they're grown men. Why do they have to apologize? Blah, blah, blah. And my larger point is if you just say something on Wednesday in the first 15 seconds, then it doesn't come up again. Like This is the best way for everyone to move on rather than the stink of the disaster in Detroit and Yellgate and whatever to linger. So I would encourage people to go check it out and not rush to judgment based on a headline or a social caption. Actually read what I'm saying of we need the Broncos to go 10-7. The best way to go 10-7, just squash this little beef and move on. And Sean Payton can do that very, very quickly on Wednesday if he wants to.
Are you telling me that people don't actually read or listen to what we say? They just read the headline and then yell at us, Will?
Well, no, 90% of people do read it, but they're not the ones who are yelling at us. It's the 10% who don't read it who like to yell at us.
For sure. It's just like everybody in the comments because we love having them hang out with us too as they sit and hang with us for full 30 minutes. Everybody in the comments, seriously, we love reading them. They make my entire day. Well, Peterson, I love having you on too, so thank you so much. And happy holidays, my friend.
Yeah, happy holidays to you too, Rachel. And I probably won't talk to you again until at least not on coffee break until after coffee break. So hopefully next time we get together, we're talking about an 8-7 or a 9-7 football team.
Fingers crossed, fingers crossed. If you are watching us on YouTube, please make sure to subscribe and comment down below too. You think the Broncos will be able to pull off a win this weekend. And to everybody else, we will see you guys tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. for another episode of Coffee Break. Have a wonderful Tuesday, everybody. We'll talk to you later. Bye.